National organization, thank you, Gary, promoting to talk about restoration and the history of the bicycles. And today I'd like to introduce my husband, Carson Torpey. He started riding 10-speed bicycles in 1969, and he worked at Bicycle Sport for 20 years before opening his own business, the Bardstown Road Bicycle Company, which he ran for 23 years. He has won, he was an incredible racer, and he won 7 Kentucky State Championship bicycle races during his career. He rode 4 centuries, and one of them was in one day for 400 miles. It was called a quad century. He's also ridden high wheel centuries. Of course, the big high wheel that you saw outside, it adds another layer of complexity to ride something that large and that heavy for 100 miles in one day. But he's ridden 4 of those. And he also writes lots of articles on high wheel bicycles and about the history of Louisville and how important it was to the development of the bicycle, getting everyone out and about, and that's what he's going to be talking about today. He recently received the Commander's Award from the Wheelman for history, and because he is an author and he's written many books. The most recent is the Golden Age of Wheeling in Kentucky. So I'm so proud to welcome my husband Carson to give this talk.
Well, thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, especially to talk about one of my favorite subjects, the history of cycling, in Louisville and in Kentucky especially. The talk will not be about any particular type of bicycle. It's going to be about what people did with the bicycles and the importance that the city of Louisville had in the development of cycling. So the first question I know everybody wants to know is, when did the first bicycle come to Louisville? It was in December 1868. The Hanlon brothers was an acrobatic troupe, and they brought one of the newly invented velocipedes to Louisville as part of their act. You have to remember, no one had ever seen anybody ride a vehicle like this before. So they performed this on stage, riding it around, riding it with no hands, and so forth. And they were doing this all around the country. But it was in December that they made it to Louisville. Right after their appearance, there were a store or two that started handling velocipedes, and it didn't take long to start racing. So the next one. Here, the race was in April of 1869, just a few months later. Claudius Duval won that race. I can't imagine what it sounded like. The bikes had steel tires on them then, and probably a wooden floor. So we had a fast race and a slow race won by Thomas Dodd. Don't know much about him, just except his name. There was a financial panic in 1869, and it put an end to the velocipede here in the United States. But it kept on going in Europe, and it was developed farther and farther until the high wheel bicycle that everybody's kind of familiar with was developed. And the first one came to Louisville in August 1879. Owen Thomas Jr. Had finished his college and went on a European tour, and he came back with a high wheel bicycle. And he also came back with a bicycle agency selling the high wheel bicycles. He was very good at balancing. He could do all kinds of tricks. He was captain of the local cycling club. But after about 4 years, his interest just sort of evaporated, and his name was not mentioned much anymore in the newspapers after that. One of the major goals of people that are into cycling is to ride a century ride, or 100 miles. Back in the high wheel days, it took almost 24 hours to do that. Now, with modern bikes, that can be ridden in about 6 hours. But the first century ride that was recorded in the United States was from Louisville to Frankfort, Kentucky. And here are the two people, Orville Lawson, and if I can remember his other name, can't remember the other guy's name, Henry Scheffler.
Yeah.
They rode in December on a cold day, so the roads must have been frozen, which helped them, maintain their speed. They finished in a snowstorm in the dark, had several wrecks, but they were both back at their desk at work the next morning. It was recorded in the Louisville commercial newspaper, and they were able to send a clipping of that article to the League of American Wheelmen to establish their claim. Just after that, one of the cycle clubs, combined with the Amateur Baseball Association, built a 1/4-mile bicycle racing track around the baseball field. There were already stands for 10,000 people, and this became the first bicycle racing track in the United States. The location was at 4th and Magnolia, and we know that today is St. James Court. The length of St. James Court is about a 1/4 mile, which was the length of that track. So if you're there, you can look at the oval and imagine, racing a high-wheel bicycle on that track. There was a Louisville, the bottom is a ticket stub to that track, the opening of the track. I happened to find that by accident, stuck between the pages of a book at the Filson Historical Society. I was tempted to put it in my pocket and take it home. But I did tell them about it, so hopefully they preserved it a little better. Down at the track, Louisville had a pretty fast racer then, Charles H. Jenkins. He broke the mile record in the very first meet. He then went on to become the first person to ride a mile in under 3 minutes. And he also became the 50-mile champion of the United States. He got married a little bit after, and his racing career was over, but he stayed with cycling, working in administration and helping with parades and stuff for at least 20 more years. Clubs came and went back and forth. There were always about 300 high-wheel bicycles in town, which is a lot of high-wheel bicycles, but it's not a lot of cyclists, compared to today. But in 1887, the Louisville Cycle Club was formed under the direction of Harry Tileson. He was a dentist and eventually became the dean of the University of Louisville Dental School. This club was composed of people who were go-getters, and they actually did a lot of stuff, organizing events, putting on big races and parades and so forth. They also had a clubhouse on 2nd Street, just south of Chestnut. Right now it would be right behind the L&M Federal Credit Union building and parking lot. It's the approximate location. It's hard to see from the insurance maps, but there's a small star that sort of shows you, and Chestnut is at the top of the the map. In 1890, the Louisville Cycle Club got new uniforms. They had white jackets with blue stripes, and this photo appears in lots of magazines, usually with the date early 1900s. But by then, nobody was riding a high-wheel bicycle anymore. In 1900, it was about 50-50 with the cyclists in the club. Half rode the high wheel and didn't want to give it up. The other half, were riding the new safety-style bicycles with two wheels the same size. And here's another picture. Same thing, you can see both styles of bicycles there. Some of these pictures are said to be at Fountain Ferry Park, but the cyclists didn't go to Fountain Ferry Park very often. There wasn't anything there that would entice them to go there. They couldn't go for dinner. Nobody served meals. We think that these are at Wilder Park, in the Wilder Park neighborhood. The cyclists went there and even rode on the racetrack, training, and had races, on the racetrack at Wilder Park. Then there's one more photograph. This is the Independent Cycle Club. Everybody wanted to be involved in the club, and there weren't enough positions for everybody, so these people started their own club. So they could all be president or vice president or lieutenant. Evidently that was real important.
Sort of like the Louisville Historical.
And I guess that's a good problem, because it's real hard to get officers in a lot of organizations. Nobody wants to do it. And but again, you saw several different styles of bicycles. After the club at St. James Court was taken away for the Southern Exposition, a new track was built around at the auditorium at Fireworks Amphitheater at was it 4th and
Fourth and Galbraith.
Galbraith. And so here you can see at the bottom is the auditorium building. There was a grandstand and then a track built around a lake where they would have the fireworks displays. It was 6 laps to the mile, so it was a little shorter than what most people are used to. And you may have seen this picture. It shows up occasionally in several books. You can see the grandstand. It is a little difficult to make out the track, but it does encircle, the middle. You can sort of see the infield. And then the next slide will show some of the races starting at the inside. The big feature that this track had was it was the first one in the United States to have electric lighting. Most of the racing was done at nighttime, which allowed people to come after work when it was cooler in the evening and stay out of the hot sun. They had track races and also road races. They'd start the road races and then they would go out on 3rd Street, Southern Parkway, and then come back. With the pneumatic safety bicycle, a lot of women eventually got into cycling as well as the men. And they were giving up their restrictive clothing, wearing much looser clothing designed to be safe on a bicycle. And here is Miss Duff on the left. She was the first person to wear bloomers in the city. One of the men from the cycle company bought the bloomers, gave it to her if she would ride them. They rode around downtown, went to lunch. The newspapers came out, they drew crowds all over to see her. And the other picture is just a representation of what you might see on 3rd Street or Southern Parkway at the time. The first women's road race in the United States was here in Louisville. It was won by Lizzie Stroman. It started at Southern Parkway in Woodlawn, went south to Iroquois Park, turned around, and came back. Over 6,000 people came out to see this race. They'd never seen women wear bloomers. Everybody wanted to see that. It was just real exciting. Lizzie crossed the finish line first, and then the crowd could not control themselves after that. And they squeezed in until there was no place in the road for anybody else to go, and all the other participants crashed. Some of them were able to get up and roll their bikes across the finish line. So they did have, a podium finish. And then some were carried away with torn stockings and bleeding knees and so forth. The Courier-Journal wrote it all up, and they expressed that they did not like to see women racing. They did not like to see women sweating. It was unwomanly like. So you don't see too much of that anymore. This was all in 1894, and the big thing that happened in 1894 was the building of the Fountain Ferry bicycle racing track. And again, here's another photograph, and this one also you see it says in a lot of books that it was in the 1900s. Well, it was November 1894. You can tell there's only one box seat. In 1896, box seats lined the whole front, and the roof's not finished, and it had 3 spires. So you'll see that on the next slide.
There's a misspelling up there. Did anyone catch the misspelling?
Go back. Yeah.
Go back to your slide. There's a misspelling. It's Fontaine Ferry Park.
Well, the owner of the park, Tony Landenwich, liked the fountain spelling. And that's what it was. The legal papers and corporation had that name on it. All the cycling publications used that name. When he sold the park in 1905, he sold Fountain Ferry Park to the Fontaine Ferry Park Amusement Association. So you see that a lot too, that the spellings go back and forth. The dates go back and forth.
For more than 50 years,
Yeah.
in the telephone directory, it was spelled both ways.
Yeah.
That's acceptable.
But it's always been pronounced Fountain Ferry. So I figured that's why Tony Landenwich had that spelling on it, because that's the way everybody pronounced it. So it was. It looks a little bit like Churchill Downs, except it's got 3 spires. And the first group of people to use it was the Stearns racing team. Let's see the next slide. They came to set speed records. Fountain Ferry was the first track to be all cement. There was no clay surfaces on it. And it was scientifically built so that the riders could hold their speeds in the turns. Even the tandems and triplet, bikes for 3 and 4, could hold their speeds through the turns safely. So here's the guy in the middle with like the bathrobe on. He's John Johnson, who was the racer. Next to him with the cigar and the bowler hat, that's Tony Landenwich, the owner of the park. Prince Wells is second from left, and fourth from left is Howard Jeffries, another big bike shop owner. And you may have remembered Highland Cycle on Bardstown Road. That's a direct descendant from Howard Jeffries. Here's a picture, not a very good quality, from a bike race in 1895. That's the start. And next.
Is it not working? Hang on, it will, there it goes.
Okay. In 1896, Louisville hosted the League of American Wheelmen annual meet. The newspapers just really went crazy with this. Every day had about 4 or 5 pages of the newspaper devoted to the events, to the racing. All the big racing men in the country were racing at Fountain Ferry. And there's a couple more pages out on the porch just to give you an idea, how extensive that was. There were about 12,000 cyclists came to Louisville to take part in it. Here's a photograph I got off eBay. It was misidentified as being Churchill Downs. It's a picture of the press box at the meet at Fountain Ferry.
Sorry. It kind of, it was hesitating.
Can we go back? What I want you to notice is how everybody is dressed. The temperature was in the 90s all week long.
It's coming. Just keep talking.
Yeah, it may be the next one. And you can see everybody is dressed right up to their neck. I don't know how they survived it. And you can see all the box seats now that were built to accommodate the large crowd. Okay, the next time women were racing was at Phoenix Hill. I think that we've all heard that they had a bicycle track there, but the Courier-Journal did have a photograph. Again, it's very difficult to see. The racing track was built inside the dance hall, 22 laps to a mile. It was only women who raced here. They raced for 6 days, usually 2 to 3 hours a night, for a week. And to finish off, let's mention the cyclists. A lot of people have heard of Prince Wells. As a teenager, he traveled around the country doing tricks on his bicycle, participated in races. In 1890, he came back to Louisville, got married, opened a bike store. He promoted a lot of races, parades. He was really involved in the cycling scene. And when the golden age died back, he turned his attention to automobiles and became one of the first dealers in automobiles here in Kentucky. The next person is Owen Kimball, Old King Tuck. Most people have not heard of him, but he was one of the star bicycle racers the 1890s and early 1900s. He won the 2-mile national championship and the quarter-mile championship in 1898. He won an international race in Montreal in 1899. And the last race of his career was in Paris, France, in 1903, against all the European champions and Major Taylor, who was over there. It was meant to be a goodbye race for Major Taylor, who was one of the American champions. But Owen Kimball managed to steal the thunder from everybody. He came back to Louisville and retired for whatever reason. It's never been seen in the paper that I know of. The third person is Alexander Paproff. He was the oldest League of American Wheelmen member in 1893 when he sold his high wheel bicycle, got one of the new safety bikes. He and a friend rode up to Chicago to see the Columbian Exposition, and then they rode to the newly opened Yellowstone National Park. You have to remember there were no roads to the park at that time, just the railroad. They spent several nights sleeping in the open air. They had to carry all their food. They finally got tired and hired a guide who got them to the park. Pap Ruff rode back home. His friend E.E. Mitchell rode all the way to Seattle and then back. And they said they would not like to repeat the ride. Grave, which has a big bronze bicycle wheel and the symbol of the League of American Wheelmen. The other thing they did was build a stone bench at 3rd and Southern Parkway here in Louisville, known locally as Wheelman's Bench. The correct name was the Ruff Memorial. It's still there. I don't think that many cyclists use it anymore, but when I first started, a lot of rides started from that place.
Okay.
So it's in Wayside Park near Churchill Downs. So you can still go by there and sit on the bench and remember Pap Ruff.